My mother-in-law thought she had one, until she opened the box at the funeral.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
In a grand, three-story white mansion, a facade of a happy family admired by all who saw it was being performed day after day. Clara was the wife of Alexander, a kind, hard-working mechanical engineer who was also so timid it could drive one mad. Alexander was the only child of Isabella, a 60-year-old woman with piercing eyes. Isabella ruled the mansion like a sovereign general. In her eyes, Clara, a girl from a working-class background, was nothing but a shameful choice made by her son. From the very first day she entered her husband's home, Clara was met with cruel words. "Who do you think you are, stepping into this house?" Isabella asked, eyeing Clara from head to toe with disdain. "No father, a mother who sells vegetables in the market, mediocre education. Third rate." Clara pressed her lips together, trying to stay calm. Alexander stood beside her, smiling awkwardly. "Mom, come on. Clara's my wife, you should." "Quiet." Isabella cut in. "Marrying her was the first mistake of your life. But at least I'm still alive to correct it for you." Clara remembered that moment vividly, standing silently in the grand living room surrounded by oil paintings and red velvet sofas. From that moment on, she knew life as a daughter-in-law in that house would be anything but easy. The three-story mansion was breathtaking but cold. The ground floor was the shared space, where Isabella frequently hosted afternoon teas with her aristocratic friends like Mrs. Diane, Mrs. Caroline, and Mr. Joseph, a longtime friend of her late husband. Clara was never invited to sit with them. In fact, she was expected to serve. "Clara, bring more biscuits and change the tea," Isabella said while Clara was trying to catch her breath after washing a mountain of dishes. Mrs. Diane, a woman with platinum hair and a shrill voice, glanced at Clara and smirked mockingly. "This girl looks more like the help than the daughter-in-law, don't you think?" Isabella nodded. "Just like her mother. Spent her whole life selling vegetables, and now her daughter sells herself to get into a fancy house." The group burst into laughter. Clara lowered her head, gripping the tea tray tightly, her throat clenched with bitterness. The second floor was where Clara and Alexander lived, or more accurately, where Alexander slept while Clara merely existed. 1 year into their marriage, Alexander had practically disappeared from the role of husband. Always busy at the factory, he would come home only to lock himself in his study or bury himself in his phone. At first, Clara tried to open up, to grow closer. But whenever she spoke, Alexander would only respond with indifferent phrases. "What have you been doing all day to look so tired?" "Nothing much, just small chores." "Well, then don't overthink it." Clara wanted to scream, wanted to ask, "Do you even see me fading away in this house?" But she didn't dare. Every time she said something that resembled defiance, Isabella would appear out of nowhere like a radar picking up signals. "Complaining again?" "No one in this house wants to hear that," Isabella said coldly. "I told you, women should learn to accept, to stay quiet. Didn't your mother teach you that?" Clara once tried to call her own mother, Rose, but the phone line was always under Isabella's control. "You're trying to talk about this household to your mother?" Isabella said, catching Clara in the kitchen. "Let me remind you, this family does not tolerate private matters being shared outside." Clara bit her lip and hung up. She had also tried calling her old friend Stephanie, who she'd studied with at Columbia University, but every call somehow got cut off. Once, when Stephanie came to visit in person, Isabella stopped her at the gate. "Clara doesn't take uninvited guests," Isabella said, eyes fixed behind her gold-rimmed glasses. "I'm her best friend," Stephanie said. "We went to university together. I just want to." "She's a daughter-in-law now, not free to gossip with old friends." Isabella coldly shut the gate. Clara could only watch from the second-floor window, heart aching as her friend walked away, disappointed. The third floor, where Isabella lived, was off-limits. No one was allowed there without explicit permission. Clara had once gone up to search for a missing sewing scissor, and the next day, she was met with Isabella's dagger-like stare and a storm of insults. "You think this is your house? Going up to my room like you own the place? Know your place." As usual, Alexander said nothing. He quietly read his newspaper, pretending not to hear. At dinner, Clara would sit across from Isabella, trying to eat in silence, only to be subjected to another round of mockery. "Do you know how to make authentic clam chowder?" Isabella asked. I can try to learn." "Try? You try everything, don't you? No proper parents, no wonder." The long-time servant, Mr. Matthew the over-50 butler, quietly looked at Clara. He was the only one in the house who had ever said something kind to her. "Miss Clara, you have to stay strong. You don't deserve this." Clara nearly cried. That small comment felt like a fragile lifeline in an invisible abyss. But that was all. Even Matthew couldn't stand up to Isabella. Day after day, Clara lived like a shadow, voiceless, powerless, with no one on her side. Every object in the house, from bedsheets and plates to the clothes she wore, was chosen by Isabella. Clara had no key to her own room, no bank account in her name, no privacy. She was allowed to exist, but not to live. Each morning, Clara woke up at 6 a.m. to prepare breakfast for the entire household, even when she'd had less than 4 hours of sleep. If she ever seemed tired or forgot the smallest detail, Isabella would immediately strike with her icy tone. "The coffee's weak today, trying to poison the whole family." Clara forced a faint smile, eyes red and hands trembling. But she stood up and quietly poured another cup. All of Long Island began its day in golden sunlight. But for Clara, every sunrise signaled another day of surviving in a prison without bars. She sat silently on the sofa in the living room, her hands resting on her lap, trying to stay composed as Isabella stood before her holding a stack of printed bank statements. "Would you care to explain why you transferred $50 to someone named Stephanie?" Isabella asked, her tone full of authority. Clara looked down, swallowing hard. "She's my friend, she's going through a tough time." Isabella scoffed and tossed the papers on the table. "This family's money isn't for charity cases. And I do not allow you to spend a cent without my approval." "That account is from my old salary," Clara mumbled. "Old means past. You live in this house, eat here, use water and electricity here, everything you have comes from my son. And he's never said you're free to spend as you please," Isabella replied coldly. "Starting today, I'll give you $20 every morning, enough for food and personal needs. When it's gone, wait for the next day." Clara wanted to protest, but Alexander walked in at that very moment. "What's going on?" he asked. Isabella turned to her son, her tone suddenly sweet and calm, as if nothing had happened. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just giving Clara a little reminder about budgeting. You know how women need guidance." Alexander looked at his wife, his eyes blank. "Clara, just listen to Mom. It's easier." Clara nodded without a word. Her heart clenched like it was being crushed. Meals in that house were a form of psychological torture. The dining table was elegantly set with cream linens and gleaming silverware. But every dish became an excuse for Isabella to jab. "Clara, did you season this soup with salt or with your tears?" Isabella asked, raising an eyebrow after the first spoonful. Clara tried to smile. "I'm sorry, I'll bring out something else." "No need. I'll eat out, it's less of a waste. After all, you're home all day, not working, not contributing, just spending." Alexander sat across the table, saying nothing, eyes down on his plate. On another evening, when Mr. Joseph, the late husband's friend, came for dinner, Isabella wasted no time humiliating Clara in front of him. "Joseph, did you know my daughter-in-law once dreamed of becoming a teacher? But, well, life doesn't give us everything," she said, glancing at Clara meaningfully. "A teacher? That's nice. So what do you teach now?" Joseph asked. Isabella quickly cut in, "Oh, she teaches how to be a silent wife. She's an expert." Laughter erupted. Clara bowed her head, biting her lip so hard it bled. Alexander remained silent, as if he hadn't heard a thing. One afternoon, Clara was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She was rinsing vegetables when Isabella walked in and gave her a cold pat on the shoulder. "Don't forget to do the laundry for me and Alexander this afternoon. And no mixing colors. Make sure the handkerchiefs are perfectly ironed, no creases." "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, and one more thing. My niece Lucy's birthday party is this weekend. I don't want you there embarrassing me in front of my relatives. Just stay home and cook." Clara looked up, eyes wide. "I'm part of this family too." Isabella sneered. "Family? You're mistaken. This is my family. Not yours." Clara turned back to the sink, tears rolling down her cheeks. She no longer knew how many times she had cried in silence. To outsiders, Clara was a lucky woman married to a stable mechanical engineer from a wealthy family. But no one knew that behind those doors, she was an unpaid servant, controlled in every aspect of her life, body and soul. Once, Clara told Alexander, "I want to work again, even if just part-time. I could tutor kids or work at the local library." He closed his laptop without looking at her. "I don't think Mom would approve. But this is my life, Alexander. I can't live like this forever. Clara, please don't start again. Mom has taken care of everything for us. Staying home isn't hurting you." "Not hurting." Clara's voice cracked. "I'm losing myself more every day." Alexander sighed and stood up. "I'm tired. Let's talk later." "Later? When I'm completely gone?" No answer. The door slammed shut. Clara stood still in the middle of the room, hands trembling. At that moment, she realized that it wasn't just Isabella who was controlling her. The man who shared her bed was also part of the iron cage. One day, while cleaning the living room, Clara overheard Isabella sitting with Mrs. Diane and Mr. Matthew, the butler, talking about an upcoming gathering. "Lucy's been such a good girl lately." As for Clara, still the same, Isabella said. Mrs. Diane scoffed. "She's just too sweet and quiet. But I heard she's had 3 miscarriages." "That's odd. Women who are weak and overthink things tend to end up that way," Isabella said bluntly. "I've always told Alexander to find someone more suitable." Matthew looked uneasy. "Mrs. Isabella, that's a bit harsh. You're just the butler." "I don't need your input on family matters," Isabella cut in coldly. Clara stood behind the wall, her heart clenched like it was being crushed. She couldn't breathe. 3 miscarriages, 3 blades that had pierced her soul were now turned into a casual joke. She had tried so hard learning how to cook dishes Isabella liked, folding clothes exactly as instructed, even mastering how to make coffee to suit her mother-in-law's taste. But all her efforts were treated as obligations, never acknowledged. Even the smallest decisions, like buying a new pair of slippers, were scrutinized. "How much did you pay for these?" Isabella asked. $12. Wasteful. Your feet aren't anything special, just wear the old ones. Clara quietly placed the slippers into a trash bag. She began to fear the daylight, to dread weekend afternoons when Isabella's friends would gather, to dread the evenings when Alexander wasn't home and Isabella had free rein to unleash her cruelty. Clara feared her own reflection, a woman who no longer recognized herself. She sat curled up in a corner of the bedroom, arms around her belly, tears streaming down endlessly. She had just lost her 3rd baby. 3 hopes, 3 shattering losses, and every time, she endured the pain alone. No hand to hold, no words of comfort. Just the sound of the telephone ringing in a cold, echoing 3-story house, where every noise seemed to bounce off walls made of cruelty. That day, she had been hanging laundry when sudden pain seized her abdomen. It was so intense she doubled over in the small backyard. She cried out, "Alexander! Isabella," but no one heard. Alexander was away on a business trip, and Isabella was upstairs in her off-limits domain. Clara dragged herself inside and managed to call for an ambulance. At the hospital, Dr. John Carter looked at her with sympathetic eyes. "I'm very sorry, the baby was only 8 weeks along. The main cause appears to be extreme stress and severe lack of rest." Clara stared blankly at the sterile white ceiling. There were no cries. No voices calling her. Just a numbness spreading up her spine. "Where's your husband?" the doctor asked gently. He's busy with work," she replied. A lie. A way to protect herself from pity. The truth was, Alexander had known. He had only sent a short message, "I'm in a meeting. Hang in there. Everything will be fine." When Clara returned home, no one waited at the gate. No one asked how she was. Isabella was in the living room, reading the newspaper. Clara quietly opened the door and dragged herself inside. "You lost it again?" Isabella said, as if asking about the weather. Clara said nothing, just lowered her head. Isabella folded the paper and looked at Clara with eyes like knives. "I told my son you weren't fit to be a mother. Weak women shouldn't have children. Kids need strong mothers, not ones who sit around crying." Clara bit her lip, clutching the hem of her shirt. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the life you let slip away. If you didn't stay up all night watching nonsense, or get distracted while cooking, this wouldn't have happened." Clara choked. "I tried my best." "Tried? And still lost 3 babies?" Isabella scoffed. "I don't understand why God even let someone like you step into this family." Clara backed into her room, shut the door, and cried like a child. That night, she used an old phone hidden in a drawer to call her mother, Rose. But as soon as the line rang, a voice answered on the other end. "Hello. This is Isabella, Clara's mother-in-law. She's busy doing laundry right now and can't come to the phone. Don't call again." Click. The line went dead. Clara sat frozen. The next morning, she tried to send a message to her old friend Stephanie, who often checked in silently. "Clara, I'm exhausted. I don't know how much longer I can keep living like this." But before the message could go through, Isabella walked in and snatched the phone from her hands. "Who are you texting?" "Stephanie. That girl with the ridiculous red hair. You think I don't know? I told you no contact with outsiders." Clara panicked. "Please, Mom, I beg you. You're not a child for me to coddle. If you still want to live in this house, then forget your past. You have no friends, no parents, no one. Only me, the one who feeds you, houses you, and keeps you alive." Alexander walked in at that moment and saw his mother scolding Clara harshly. But, as always, he only said, "Mom, come on. Let's not make this a big deal." Clara looked at him with despair in her eyes. "Don't you see? I'm not even a person anymore." Alexander frowned and looked away. "Don't exaggerate." "Exaggerate?" Clara exhaled. "I've lost 3 babies. You never once came to the hospital with me. Every time I was in pain, collapsed, only your mother came to humiliate me. Clara, please. Don't blow things out of proportion. Mom's getting older. You need to understand." Clara turned away. That man was no longer the husband she once loved. He was just a talking shadow of Isabella. A week later, Clara's mother, Rose, came to the house to see her daughter. She stood outside the gate, knocking over and over. Isabella opened the gate, her voice icy. "What are you doing here?" "I want to see my daughter. She's not answering the phone. I'm worried. Clara is resting. She's tired." She doesn't want to see anyone. You're lying. I'm her mother, I know. You're the one who gave birth to a weak, pathetic girl, and now you want to drag her back to that filthy market life you've lived in forever. Isabella snapped. Leave. Before I call the police. Rose trembled, stepping back. I'll come back. Next time, I'll let the dogs greet you, Isabella said coldly, and slammed the gate. From the second-floor window, Clara saw everything. She couldn't cry out. Her throat felt strangled. Her hands pressed against her empty belly. She whispered, "Mom." That night, Clara sat alone in the dark. No lights. No food. No sleep. She looked at the only ultrasound photo she had left of the child she'd never meet. Isabella's voice echoed from downstairs, talking on the phone with Mrs. Diane. "I told you, Clara never fit into our family. My son was too weak, she seduced him back in college. But I've corrected him. Now he doesn't love anyone but his mother. That's what real family is." Clara heard every word like a dagger in her chest. She didn't cry anymore. Her tears had run dry after 3 miscarriages and hundreds of humiliations. She just wanted to disappear. But still, she had to live. Because no one would care for her more than she could. And because somewhere, in the long night, she could still hear her heart beating weak, but stubborn. Clara no longer looked at herself in the mirror. She walked into the room and said softly, "Alexander, can I talk to you for a moment?" He didn't turn around. "Go ahead. I feel like I'm not myself anymore. Your mother controls everything about me. I have no friends, no say in my life." Alexander stayed silent. Clara stepped 1 inch closer. "Do you still love me?" Clara asked. Only then did he look up, his eyes tired. "Clara, you're overthinking. Mom just wants what's best for us. And wanting the best means telling me I'm unfit to be a mother. I've lost 3 babies, do you even know how much that hurts?" Alexander stood up, his voice sharp. "Here we go again. It's always, you're in pain, you're suffering. Do you even realize how much pressure I'm under at work? I can't listen to complaints all the time." Clara clenched her fists. "This isn't a complaint. It's a cry for help." He scoffed. "If it's that unbearable, then leave." Clara choked on her words. "Leave? Go where? I have no home, no money, no family." Alexander shrugged. "I don't know. But you can't dump all the responsibility on me." He turned away, leaving Clara standing there, with no tears left to shed. A few days later, Isabella walked into Clara's room without knocking. She held an old phone in her hand and opened it to reveal a message. "Clara, how long were you planning to hide this?" Isabella asked, eyes gleaming with cruelty. Clara frowned. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Isabella held up the phone screen, displaying a fabricated message filled with implications. "Stephen, don't worry. I'll get you out of that hell. You just have to be brave enough." Clara gasped. That's not from me. I don't know anyone named Stephen." "Oh, really?" Isabella shrugged. "This message was sent from your phone. I just happened to see it. But it certainly explains why you've been so gloomy and depressed, doesn't it?" Clara trembled. "I swear, I don't know any Stephen." Alexander walked in, his expression dark. "What's going on, Mom?" Isabella handed him the phone. "Look for yourself, son. See who she really is." Clara burst into tears. "Alexander, I didn't do anything. Someone faked that message. I swear." Alexander looked at the screen, then at his wife. He said nothing. He simply turned and walked out of the room. That night, he slept in his study. Clara lay on the bed alone, curled up like an abandoned child. She didn't know what was real anymore, what was false. She was terrified, panicked. She even began to question her own memory. The next morning, she saw Isabella smiling smugly at Diane in the kitchen. "My son finally understands. A woman like Clara isn't to be trusted. Being weak is one thing, but betrayal is unforgivable." Diane whispered, "But, that message, was it real?" Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Who cares? As long as it works." They both burst out laughing. Clara stood behind the door, hearing every word. From that day on, Alexander stopped speaking to Clara. He avoided her gaze, avoided all contact. Sometimes, he would leave early in the morning and not return until late at night. Clara became mute. She didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She just did everything like a machine, cleaning, cooking, laundry. She vanished from her own life. One day, Mr. Matthew, the aging butler, brought her a cup of hot tea. He gently set it down and spoke softly. "Miss Clara, I've seen many people treated unfairly. But you're the strongest person I've ever met." Clara didn't respond. She just looked at him with hollow eyes. "I know you've done nothing wrong. It's just that, in this house, speaking up gets you cut off." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "But now I have nothing left to lose." By October, Long Island had begun to chill. The wind was crisp, the sky gray like it was hiding some heavy secret. Clara sat alone in the living room, staring blankly at a cold cup of tea. Time and weather no longer meant anything to her. Everything had frozen into one long, endless days. Sometimes she wondered if she had already died and just hadn't realized it yet. The sound of the phone rang sharply through the silence. Isabella picked up, her voice brisk. "Hello." She paused for a few seconds, then frowned. "Yes, this is Alexander's mother." Another pause. Suddenly, her face turned pale. Her hand shook as she gripped the receiver. "No, that can't be. Are you sure?" I understand." She slowly set the phone down. The sharpness usually carved into her features had gone stiff. Clara sat up straight. "What's wrong?" Isabella didn't answer right away. She walked slowly to the couch, sat down, and looked Clara directly in the eyes. "Alexander, he's dead." Clara froze. "No, what are you saying?" "There was an accident on the highway. He lost control, hit a guardrail. The car burst into flames. The air in the room thickened until it was impossible to breathe." Clara staggered back, clutching the edge of the sofa. No. He messaged me this morning. He said he'd be home for dinner." Isabella exhaled, not a single tear falling. "The police are investigating. But they said there was no sign of a collision. Probably fell asleep at the wheel." Clara wanted to scream, to rip the pain into pieces. But her body had frozen. Her mind no longer commanded her limbs. She just sat there, tears streaming like a broken dam. The funeral was held 2 days later at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Rain poured down relentlessly. Clara wore a black dress, walking behind Isabella like a shadow. Throughout the service, she never took her eyes off Alexander's photo, the man who, though weak, had once been her last hope. But the strangest thing was Isabella. She didn't cry. Not a single tear. Her face remained cold and composed. She sat in the front row, occasionally shaking hands like she was at a networking event. Mrs. Diane whispered to Mr. Joseph while glancing at Clara. "She looks wrecked. She just lost her husband. What do you expect?" Joseph replied quietly. "Yeah, but I bet Isabella hasn't let her near the inheritance papers." "Oh, without a doubt." After the burial, the family gathered at the mansion. Isabella stood in the living room, holding a glass of wine, and clapped a few times to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to pay your respects. I know this is a great loss," she began. But Alexander was a wise man. He knew to prepare for every possibility. People murmured. Clara stared at her, a sense of dread crawling over her skin. Isabella held up a thick envelope. "This is the will Alexander signed before his last business trip. Notarized and fully legal." She opened it, pulled out a printed copy, and read aloud. "I, Alexander Smith, being of sound mind and body, hereby leave all my assets, including the mansion, company shares, and bank accounts, to my mother, Mrs. Isabella Taylor, who raised me to be the man I am." The room fell silent. Clara took a step forward. "No, that's not true. Alexander told me, he wanted to start a scholarship fund, he wanted to transfer the small house into our child's name." Isabella turned to her, smirking. "You really thought he loved you that much? A woman who's had 3 miscarriages. A disobedient, inadequate daughter-in-law." Clara shook. "No. This isn't true." The family lawyer, Mr. Benjamin Harris, entered through the main door. He was in his 60s, thin, but moved briskly, with a weathered face and sharp eyes. "I'm here to verify the will," he said, placing his briefcase on the table. "I was the one who personally witnessed Alexander's signature." Clara turned to him. "Mr. Benjamin, please, is it true? Did he really leave everything to her?" Mr. Benjamin looked at Clara, his eyes softening. But then he nodded. "This will is legally valid." Isabella lifted her chin high, her eyes gleaming like a victor in a long war. "And therefore, as of today, Clara is no longer a legal member of this household," she declared. "I'm giving you 3 days to pack your things." "What?" Clara stammered. I have nowhere to go." "Not my problem," Isabella shrugged. "Alexander left you nothing. This relationship is over." The room stayed silent. No one dared to speak. Some relatives lowered their eyes to avoid Clara's gaze. Others turned away, as if afraid to catch her misfortune. Clara looked around, desperate. "Isn't there anyone who will stand up for me?" Mrs. Diane murmured, "We don't have a say." Mr. Matthew, the elderly butler, stood quietly in a corner, his eyes red, but even he remained silent. Isabella chuckled. "There, you see. What good is it to fight the whole world alone? Learn to accept it." Clara broke. She turned and ran upstairs, slammed the door shut, and collapsed onto the bed. For the first time in years, she screamed out loud, a scream full of rage, sorrow, and absolute devastation. 3 days later, as promised, Isabella changed the front door lock. Clara left with only a small suitcase containing a few old clothes, a comb, and a yellowed wedding photo. Long Island was still cold. But this time, the chill came from inside her heart. Clara stood in front of the iron gates of the old mansion, clutching her faded suitcase tightly in her arms. A light drizzle fell onto her hair, soaking her collar, cold as ice. 3 days had passed since Isabella had thrown her out. 3 days wandering Long Island like a ghost, with hollow eyes and a phone that had no one left to call. Thankfully, Stephanie, the old friend once banned by Isabella, answered her desperate message. "Oh my God, Clara. Where are you?" "I'm coming right now." Just 20 minutes later, an old blue car pulled up. The door flung open and Stephanie rushed over, wrapping her arms around Clara, her voice choked. "You've lost so much weight. You don't even look like yourself." Clara tried to force a crooked smile. I don't even know who I am anymore. Come home with me. Stay as long as you need. Don't worry about money or anything else." "I'm here," Stephanie said, squeezing her friend's shoulders, eyes brimming with tears. Stephanie's small apartment was on the 3rd floor of a worn-down building near Times Square. It wasn't fancy, but to Clara, it felt like paradise after so many months in hell. She slept for 2 full days. When she finally woke up, Stephanie was at the table, cooking soup. "I made chicken noodle soup, the one you loved back in college," Stephanie said gently. "Thank you. You still remember." "How could I forget? You used to say it was the only flavor that made you feel alive." Clara lowered her head. "I used to be alive, now I just exist." Stephanie walked over and took her hand. "Clara, look at me. They've hurt you enough. It's time to get up." "Get up for what? I have nothing left, my husband, my children, my family, it's all gone." "No. You still have yourself. And you still have me." A week later, Clara began to recover. She started helping around the apartment, cleaning, grocery shopping, cooking. The little tasks gave her a rare sense of peace. But just as things seemed to settle, news from the old mansion reached her. Stephanie came bursting through the door, breathless. "Clara! You won't believe this. Isabella just threw a party at the mansion." Clara froze. "A party?" "A victory party, celebrating her win. All the relatives and close friends were there. I saw a post from that Diane woman. She wrote, 'A great woman always knows how to protect her family from parasites and freeloaders.'" Clara laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable." Stephanie fumed. She also wrote, "I taught my son from a young age, never let a broken woman destroy your future." Clara stood up, trembling. They called me a broken woman." "They didn't name you, but everyone knows who they meant." Clara clenched her fists. I can't believe this." Stephanie put a hand on her shoulder. "I know it hurts. But don't give them more reasons to gloat. You survived, Clara. Don't go back to that dead place." Clara looked out the window. The rain was still falling lightly. But this time, it didn't feel as cold. Something was burning inside her, not hatred, but resolve. Meanwhile, at the 3-story mansion, Isabella raised a glass of red wine in the crowded living room. She wore a sleek black dress and an old pearl necklace she always claimed was a treasured keepsake from my late husband. "Thank you all for coming today," she said loudly, her voice commanding. "I know Alexander's passing was a great loss. But it's also an opportunity to realign the values of our family." Scattered applause followed. Diane whispered, "She always talks like a politician." Isabella continued, "I will not allow anyone, especially outsiders, to undermine this family's foundation. Clara is a lesson. And I believe every woman here should learn from it." A man in his 50s, Eric, Alexander's cousin, spoke up, "But Clara was your nephew's wife. Surely." Isabella cut him off immediately. "No one in this family is allowed to defend a traitor." Mr. Joseph, seated nearby, murmured, "All I saw was a daughter-in-law abandoned, with no one on her side." Isabella turned coldly. "Joseph, if you feel so sorry for her, why don't you marry her?" The room went quiet. All eyes turned toward her. Diane gave a nervous laugh. "All right, let's drink. Isabella's always been made of steel." Isabella smirked. "I'm not strong. I just refuse to be deceived." Suddenly, the door to the room swung open. A man in a gray suit stepped inside, holding a wooden box. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said clearly. "I'm attorney Benjamin Harris. I have something Alexander left behind before his death." Everyone turned. "Benjamin?" Isabella frowned. "What is this about?" Mr. Benjamin lifted the box. "A month before he passed, Alexander gave me this and said, 'Only give it to my mother when she truly believes she's won.' I heard about your party today. I believe the time is now." Isabella pursed her lips. "Give it to me." At that moment, Clara stepped into the room brought by Stephanie at Benjamin's quiet invitation. Her heels echoed across the floor. Isabella's eyes flared. Who let you in? I did, Benjamin answered. Clara has the right to hear what's in this box. Isabella frowned but said nothing. She opened the lock. The lid flipped open, revealing a USB drive and a handwritten letter. The letter read, "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Please watch the video. It's the last thing I have to leave behind." Isabella's hands trembled, but she inserted the USB into the laptop Benjamin had brought. The screen flickered to life. Alexander's face appeared gaunt, exhausted, but his eyes were clear. "Mom," his voice quivered, "if you're watching this, it means I'm no longer here. But I need you to know one thing. Clara was never at fault." The entire room fell silent. Every gaze locked on the laptop screen in stunned silence. Outside, the rain continued falling like a sorrowful melody echoing the heavy moment. On the screen, Alexander sat in his familiar study. He wore a white shirt, his face hollow, dark circles under his eyes, but his voice firm. "I don't know if I'll live to see the day you understand, Mom," he began, hoarse. "But I have to say this. For Clara, for the child growing inside her." Clara froze. She gripped the edge of the chair, barely breathing. On screen, Alexander looked straight into the camera. "I know what you did. You controlled Clara's bank account. You forbade her from working, isolated her from her friends, and even faked messages to make me doubt my own wife. I believed you. And I was wrong." Isabella recoiled. "He's lying." Benjamin raised a hand. "Please, let the video play." Alexander went on, "I was a coward. I saw Clara's pain, her loneliness, but I didn't defend her. I didn't stand up to you. I let the woman I love become a shadow, tormented to the point of losing 3 babies." Clara lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. Stephanie gently placed her hand on Clara's back. "In the end, I made things right, Mom," Alexander said in the video. "I drew up a new will, legal, notarized, leaving everything I own to Clara, the only woman I ever chose with my heart, and to the child she is carrying." Gasps rippled through the room. A young woman blurted out, "Clara is pregnant." Clara tightened her grip, trying to hold back tears. She had known this moment would come. And now, everyone knew. On the screen, Alexander bowed his head. "I love you, Mom, but I no longer trust you. You turned me into a puppet and Clara into a sacrifice. I can't let that continue." He looked up at the camera one last time. "If you're opening this box during some kind of victory celebration, then I'm sorry, because you were wrong." The screen went black. Silence. Then Isabella shot up like a spring. "He lied. Clara bewitched him. She used manipulation. That's enough." Benjamin thundered for the first time since he entered. The room went dead still. Benjamin opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. "This is the final legal will, notarized by me. There is video testimony, attached bank records, and written documentation confirming Clara as the sole heir to Alexander's estate." Isabella turned pale. "No. I have the old will. I'm his mother. The old will has been voided." "Alexander revoked it by hand and stated his reasons," Benjamin said. "From this moment on, the mansion, the assets, the company shares, all belong to Clara." A chorus of murmurs erupted in the living room. Diane stepped back. "My God, so Clara was the one he really chose." "She's a brilliant actress," Isabella hissed, jabbing a finger at Clara. "She planned this from the start. She got pregnant just to trap my son." Clara stood, her voice trembling but firm. "No. I got pregnant out of love. And you only know how to love yourself." Isabella lunged, hand raised as if to strike, but Eric intercepted her immediately. "Enough, Isabella," he snapped. You've shamed all of us. She stepped back, her face flushed with fury. You've spent your whole life controlling others, Joseph said coldly. And now look, you've lost everything. Silence. Isabella screamed. I raised Alexander. I taught him to be a man. And you also made him die with regret, Clara said softly. Isabella staggered backward and sank onto the couch as if all strength had left her. No one went to her. The guests who had clapped earlier began to drift away. Someone whispered. She's terrifying. Now I understand why Alexander was always so quiet. She never even cried. The room emptied slowly. Only a few of Alexander's relatives remained, their eyes on Clara. Stephanie squeezed Clara's hand and whispered, You did it. You won. Clara exhaled, resting her hand on her stomach. Not to win. Just, so the truth could be heard at last. Benjamin stepped forward, his voice steady and warm. Miss Clara, the small house in the suburbs that Alexander owned, it was transferred to your name before his passing. You can start over. With the baby. Clara nodded, tears falling quietly. Thank you, for everything. She walked out of the mansion she'd once been exiled from, head held high. The rain had stopped. The last rays of sun lit the red-tiled roof, casting golden light on the road ahead. Clara didn't look back. The air inside the mansion remained heavy after Alexander's video. That suffocating weight hung over everyone, each breath thick and stifled. Isabella slumped in her chair, white-knuckled fingers gripping the armrests like they were her last hold on anything. Clara stood still. Her face was pale, hands clenched. But in her eyes, for the first time in years, there was light. Benjamin Harris looked around the room and spoke clearly. As you all have seen, this video is direct evidence of Alexander Smith's final will. In my presence, he created a fully notarized document with absolute legal standing. Diane stammered, Are you sure? I thought the first will was final. Benjamin nodded. The original was formally revoked by Alexander himself. I have both video and signed documentation. Isabella leapt up again. No. This is a setup. A trap. Clara tricked him. Clara raised her head. Her voice was calm, but resolute. If truth is a trap, then yes, you walked right into it, Isabella. You're a fraud. No, Joseph interjected, his voice low. The fraud is you. All eyes turned toward Isabella. She trembled, but still shouted. I'm his mother. I fed him, raised him, cared for him every day. And you're also the reason he had to leave behind that video, Stephanie cut in, unable to hide her fury. You're the reason he died carrying guilt he couldn't even voice. Benjamin turned the pages of the legal documents. According to this final, lawful will, all assets including the mansion, bank accounts, company shares, and the second apartment in the suburbs have been left to Alexander's legal wife, Miss Clara Taylor. Another wave of whispers. So that small house really belongs to Clara. I thought Isabella owned everything. Isabella staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. No. You can't take it all. Clara stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. I didn't take anything, Isabella. Alexander gave it. He made it right for me, for himself, and for our child. A new ripple of murmurs spread. She really is pregnant? Isabella whispered, as if unable to believe it, no. She can't have children. I told her. You told me I wasn't fit to be a mother, Clara interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. But you're not God. And a miracle happened the moment I was free of you. Stephanie stepped forward and held Clara's hand. She's not only worthy of being a mother. She's worthy of living. Eric sighed and turned to Isabella. Cousin, I didn't know you were capable of such cruelty. If Alexander were alive and saw you now, he'd call the police. He already did, Benjamin added. Before he passed, Alexander filed a report detailing the prolonged emotional abuse Mrs. Isabella inflicted on his wife. The police are now reviewing the evidence. Isabella stumbled back, her lips moving silently. No, you can't do this to me. I'm his mother. Benjamin's tone was ice. No one can undo the years of guilt and pain your son lived through. But justice can still finish what he couldn't. Clara looked down at her belly. Her hand instinctively rested on the small life growing inside. She took a deep breath, then raised her head to face everyone. I'll leave this mansion tomorrow, she said. I don't want to live in a place built with so much pain. But I will honor what Alexander left me. I'll raise this child with all the love he never got the chance to give. A woman among the relatives spoke up, Clara. I'm sorry. For staying silent so long. And I am too, Joseph said, eyes filled with regret. I should have stood by you sooner. Clara nodded gently. Better late than never. Isabella sat motionless, trembling. No one approached her. Diane stepped back and whispered to the person beside her, I think we should leave. One by one, people filed out of the mansion. No one touched Isabella's shoulder. No one said goodbye. The respect once given to her had turned into fear and pity. Clara stepped forward and faced Isabella one last time. You forbade me from calling my mother. You kept me from stepping outside. You called me a freeloader, said I had no parents, no worth. But you forgot one thing. Isabella looked up, her eyes clouded. I have a heart. And today, that heart is what made Alexander tell the truth. He saw who you really were right before he left this world. Clara turned and walked away with Stephanie. At the door, she looked back. Isabella, she said gently but firmly, one last thing, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I want my child to grow up in peace. Isabella slumped in her chair, tears finally spilling from her eyes. Clara stepped out of the mansion into the fading light. A soft breeze swept through. And for the first time in a long time, she felt light as if she'd just put down 100 pounds of stone. Stephanie opened the car door and smiled. Do you want to go to the house Alexander left you? I have the key. Clara nodded. Yes. Let's go home. That afternoon, in a quiet suburb of Long Island, a small white house appeared behind a low wooden fence. There was a little flower garden, a wooden swing, and sunlit windows. Clara stepped inside and fell silent. Everything was new, simple but warm. On the wooden table in the center of the room sat a photo frame, a picture of Clara beaming with joy, one she had sent Alexander during their first year of marriage. Beneath it was a handwritten note. If one day you have to walk alone, walk into this house. I've prepared everything. Nothing fancy, just peace. I love you. Clara broke down in tears. Stephanie stood quietly behind her, then stepped forward and embraced her. You're no longer a shadow, Clara. You're the light now. The small house in the Long Island suburbs glowed gently in the golden afternoon light. Clara stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of herbal tea. A breeze came through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of lavender and mint from the yard Stephanie had planted. Everything felt strangely peaceful. Stephanie sat cross-legged on a wooden chair, munching an apple as she looked at her friend. Are you planning to stay here for good? She asked. Clara nodded softly. I think this is what Alexander wanted. And I want it too. Stephanie raised an eyebrow. What about Isabella? She'll have to face everything on her own. I don't need to do anything else. Stephanie smirked. Now that's the strongest comeback, not revenge, but not needing revenge. The phone rang. Clara glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Benjamin, the lawyer. She answered. Hello, Mr. Benjamin. His deep, warm voice came through. Hello, Clara. I'm calling to let you know the inheritance accounts have officially been transferred to your name. Also, Alexander's company shares are under your temporary control until the baby is born. Clara exhaled. Thank you. It still feels like a dream. I've known Alexander since he was a student. He was a good man, just not brave enough until the very end. Benjamin paused. Live well, Clara. Live for both of you. Clara's voice cracked. I'll try. After hanging up, she turned to Stephanie. I want to see my mother. It's been so long since I called her. Stephanie smiled. Let's go. I'll come with you. Rose opened the door, stunned to see her daughter standing there with tear-filled eyes. Clara, is it really you? You're alive? She burst into tears. Mama, Clara embraced her tightly, speechless. Stephanie stepped back, smiling softly. Inside the small home, the aroma of warm, homemade food filled the air. Rose pulled out a chair for her daughter. I made the chicken soup you love, she said, wiping her tears. Clara smiled, running her fingers over the table. I missed this so much. Rose looked at Clara for a long moment, then said seriously, You've endured so much, Clara. I knew it, but I couldn't help you. I was weak. Clara shook her head. No, you weren't weak. I was like you, I stayed silent for too long. What will you do now? Her mother asked. I'll live as myself. I'll raise my child with love. And I'll never let anyone silence me again. Rose took her daughter's hand. You've come back, and you're stronger than ever. Meanwhile, Isabella sat alone reading the paper in the now empty mansion. She slowly stepped out onto the balcony with a glass of wine. Her eyes were red. Her hair had more gray than before. The doorbell rang. It was Joseph. I'm not in the mood for visitors, Isabella said coldly. Don't worry. I'm not in the mood to stay long, he replied. Just came to say a few words. What do you want? For you to know everyone has turned their back on you. And you deserve it. Isabella scoffed. Then why bother coming? Because I cared about Alexander. And I don't want his death to be meaningless. Isabella stiffened. You didn't lose him to an accident. You lost him to yourself, Joseph continued. And now you've lost everything. That's the fairest ending I've ever seen. He turned and walked away, leaving Isabella alone with a glass of wine that had no taste. Back in the suburban house, Clara sat in the living room writing in her journal. Her belly had just begun to show, enough for her to need looser clothes. Stephanie arrived with a maternity dress and a bright smile. Clara, someone from a women's support center called your phone today. They left a message. Clara opened the message and read. We are deeply moved by your story. If you're willing, we would like to invite you to speak at our program, Rebirth After Darkness. Clara smiled softly. I should say yes, shouldn't I? Stephanie nodded. You're no longer a victim. You're an inspiration. 2 months later, in a small auditorium in downtown Long Island, Clara stood at a microphone. In the audience sat women who had been abused, silenced, and shamed. No one spoke. They just listened. Hello, Clara began, her voice clear. I once lived in a 3-story mansion, but couldn't even choose what to eat. I once believed I couldn't be a mother because someone planted that idea in my head. She looked down at her belly, then back up. But today, I'm here. Not because I'm stronger than anyone else, but because I refuse to stay broken. Applause broke out. Clara smiled. In the audience, Stephanie held a camera, eyes glistening. After the event, an older woman approached Clara quietly. My daughter is going through what you once did, she said softly. Today, because of you. I found the courage to go to her. Clara took the woman's hand and smiled. It's never too late to start again. That evening, Clara sat on her porch, holding a photo of Alexander placed on a small table. "My love," she whispered. "I know now you tried harder than I ever knew. And I know, even though you're gone, you're still here." She touched her belly. "Our child will know their father was a good man. I promise." A gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender through the air. Above, the clouds cleared, revealing a sky full of stars. Clara no longer cried. She was no longer a shadow. She was the author of her own life. Clara's story is proof that silence cannot protect us forever, but truth can. Though she was oppressed, insulted, and pushed to despair, Clara never lost her dignity or her humanity. It was her quiet resilience and true love that helped her rise, reclaim justice, and begin a new life filled with light. The greatest lesson is this: no matter how hard others try to extinguish you, you still have the right to stand and shine.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.